Okay. So welcome to Advanced Toastmasters Online. Here's some online meeting tips. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and you can toggle your video on and off if you are eating or if you leave your seat, like Andrea just did, but you don't have to, but we do want to see you. So you can adjust your view from your end right now. This is what it would look like if it's in gallery view. In order to switch it to speaker view, you just click on this button up here where it says speaker view. And if you have questions or if you want to make notes for the speakers, you can do that privately through the chat function and just click on their name and send them a private message. Please do that in between their speeches though, because it will pop up on their screen while they're speaking. That's a little bit distracting. So do that between speeches. As a reminder, this meeting will be recorded. It's our policy that by participating in the meeting that you agree that a recording will be made available publicly on YouTube and on our website. If you are not a member and you want to inquire about joining, start here where it says become a member and all the information will be shown to you there. And at this point, I'd like to put the gavel down and say, welcome to Toastmasters Online. And I'm going to pass it over to our Toastmaster of the Day, Trisha, and ask her to read our mission of the club. Trisha.
Yes, thank you. We are an advanced Toastmasters club, which support Maverick leaders to have more impact by providing advanced feedback on leadership skills and discovering what it means to be an out-of-the-box, innovative leader. Welcome to Advanced Toastmasters. And I'm trying to pull up the agenda. Sorry. There you go. The Toastmaster meeting is made up of 3 parts: prepared speakers, table topics, and evaluation. We have some helpers for today. First, we have our grammarian, who is myself. And their duty is to listen for ahs, ums, whatever pause words you might happen to say when you're trying to gather your thoughts for a moment. Instead, just pause, collect your thoughts, and then move forward. In addition, I'll be providing a word for today. Today's word is veracity. It's a noun, and it means conformity to facts or accuracy. And to use it in a sentence, sometimes photojournalism is so brilliant that a natural reaction is to doubt its veracity. Next, I would like to introduce our timer, Tammy, and ask her to show what her timing parameters will look like for today.
Okay, I will use this card. It says green. Green is green. Yellow. I think you can, it's yellowish, but the word yellow's there. This one's pretty obvious. It's red. Those are my timing devices. Our speaker asked for 5 to 7 minutes, so green comes up at 5, yellow at 6, and red at 7.
Thank you, Tammy. And we have one prepared speaker today. That is going to be Andrea, and I believe she's speaking out of humorously speaking, and leave them with a smile, and I will let her present her title.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. My title today is Two Porcelains. I'm going to be speaking today on something that is part of my family history. And it is a story, and it is impromptu, so if there's pauses or weird things in it, that's why. I'm excited about doing this, and I'm going to start now. So can you start timing me? Your poop is my bread and butter. That's a phrase that was often heard in my family. It wasn't quite that clean, but that was a phrase that was often heard in my family. My father was a plumbing wholesale manufacturer's rep who worked with his whole family. So all of his brothers and brothers-in-law worked in this company. So when we got together, that was something we talked about a lot because that's how we made our money. One summer when I was between my 5th and 6th grade year, my mom and my dad decided that they wanted to go to Europe. And part of that was because my sister was living there at the time and we were going to go and visit her. But they also wanted to go so that my mother, who worked in a department store, in a department that sold antiques and porcelain figurines and all kinds of really wonderful, crazy stuff, could go over to Europe where she was getting a lot of her merchandise from and see it personally. Well, our very first stop in our 6-week trip was to England. We stopped there and we drove out to Royal Worcester, or Worcester, England. It's an important place in history, but first off, Royal Worcester is a place where you can get plates, and they're porcelain plates, and we got to watch them put the decals on the plates. It was really, really fun to watch them do this. Royal Worcester, this is not a Royal Worcester plate, by the way, it's a nerd hockey, but I got to watch them do this imprinting on it. They did the plates for the Reagan administration, and we got to watch them paint the gold leaf around the edge of those plates. It was just amazing, the steady hand that it takes to just hold a very, very, very thin brush down and spin it and get the perfect amount of paint on the edge of a plate. It was amazing, amazing thing to do. My mom went and talked to the owner of the company for a while, and my dad took me off to see where Richard the Lionhearted was buried while she was talking and doing business. It was this amazing moment in this big cathedral. There we were, and my dad got to tell me the story about Richard the Lionhearted, and we went out to dinner with him, and not with Richard the Lionhearted, but the company, and we got to have kidney pie and all the crazy things that go with being in England. Well, that was all good. But the next day, we drove to Stoke-on-Trent. That is where a lot of the porcelain in the world is mined. And a lot of people don't know that. Porcelain is in different grades. So there's a very fine porcelain, which would be like this. It's a very fine grain sand, basically. And then there's a rougher grade sand that they use for toilets. So there I was with the fine china person and the toilet person in the perfect place in Stoke-on-Trent, where they mined both kinds of porcelain, the sand for the porcelains. Well, when we went to the place that we were going to go to there, which was Dalton, and Dalton also does plates. You might have heard of them. They also do figurines. My mother went in to talk to Michael Dalton. And unfortunately, Michael Dalton wasn't a very nice person. In fact, he visited my mother in Seattle a few times, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but he asked her to find some entertainment for the evening. My mother refused, but that was something that happened with him. And he did become a sir at some point in his life. I'm not sure why. Anyway, my mom went in to go to talk to Michael Dalton. And again, there my dad and I were talking and laughing about porcelain and different kinds of porcelain and all those things. But they left us in the showroom. Now, my dad is a bathroom kind of guy, and they left us in a showroom. In this showroom was a big diorama It was amazing, this diorama. And inside of it were a bunch of little figurines that were called bunnykins. And they were just starting to make these little bunnykin things. And they had the little bunnykins doing different things, hopping through the thing. And I looked down and I saw this one, and I'll pull it up real close there for you. I used to make daisy chains when I was a little kid, and I thought this was amazing. Just an amazing thing. My dad and I stood out there and looked at these for a while. When my mom came out, she noticed that my dad and I were still there, which was unusual for us because we would sneak off and do things when she had business. And we were laughing and telling all these stories. And she asked Michael, what are those? And he said, oh, those are bunnykins. We don't sell them in the United States yet. And she said, oh, really? I'd like to start buying them. That is how bunnykins became popular in the 70s and 80s in the United States, is because we went to England and saw them in their showroom, and my mother brought them back to the United States. In the meantime, we went outside and we got to talk about how toilets were first founded and first made. And they were first found and made in England, flush toilets. And the first person that did that, his name was Sir John. And he made it for he and his sister, sister-in-law, I think, no, not sister-in-law, but Queen Elizabeth I. So Sir John made the first flush toilet, and later the first porcelain was done by Mr. Crapper. So you have Sir John and the Crapper all together. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Andrea. That was hilarious. Very appropriate for that particular project.
Yay!
I don't believe we have any other prepared speakers for today. So our next section will be our impromptu, which will be handled by our very own Dawn Nacera. Please help me welcome Dawn.
Yay. Okay. So my table topics today are inspired by my daughter going off to medical school. And as she was going off to medical school, she had, well, she's not there yet, but part of that process is these interviews, and they interview there, and there's a million different questions about their relationship to why they want to become a doctor. And so I thought that I would take some of those questions and kind of mix them up within this, our realm of leadership, and begin to ask some of these questions as table topics, because that's what they were. And her training as a Toastmaster, because my daughter did join Toastmasters for 3 years in college, helped her create 1 to 2 minute answers to all of these questions, even though she had, I think, 7 minutes or 8 minutes for each question, but she was able to narrow down her main idea. So some of these questions are going to be personal, and they may or may not have a direct leadership link, but I would like to invite you to think of yourself as being interviewed for a leadership role in the world, whether or not that's, a job, but probably you'll see some of the questions they're different and they're varied. So who would like to volunteer to be a first table topic question answerer? Tammy, are you able to time yourself? And
Yep, I can do it.
awesome.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to pull up these questions. So question number 1 is, what family member, friends, or other individuals have been influential in your decision to pursue leadership positions? Tammy, do you have any family members, friends, or individuals who have been an influence on your decision to be a leader, to take those leadership positions?
Well, thank you for that question. I immediately think of my direct family, my parents and my siblings and whatnot. Probably those that have influenced me most would first off be my parents. They've always been very supportive. when I've taken on new roles, when I went back to school, which I've done several times, when I went through my doctorate program in leadership. They were very supportive of that. And my mom cried at my dissertation, and it was just kind of a neat thing to experience that with them, because my other siblings haven't done that route, but very supportive. They don't always understand some of the things that I'm doing, but they know they want me to succeed. The other person probably would be my spouse. He's always been the one he was during my doctorate program, he was my proofreader, my biggest cheerleader, and he's just wholehearted, wanted success and wanted me to attain my goals. He's older. He's at the point in life where he wants to retire, but he still wants me to succeed when I continue to try to become a leader beyond what I'm doing right now. So I've had a pretty good support system as far as helping me become the leader I want to be. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering. I love that we're learning a little bit about you. I didn't know that you had a advanced degree in leadership. That's great to know. Who would like to be next? Trisha, would you like to go next? Go ahead and unmute yourself. And I'll try to mute myself this time. I think I forgot to do that the last time. So with this question, I would like to ask you, Trisha, what do you feel are the social responsibilities of a leader? Are there any? And what do you think those are? Social responsibilities of a leader.
Thank you. Well, I think sorry, how did you word it? Social of a leader? Okay. The social responsibilities of a leader. Well, I think there are a lot of social responsibilities as a leader. You want to make sure that everyone is feeling that they're plugged in, that they're involved, that their input is important, and value them, and that they can come to you and know that their voice will be heard. I also think that as a leader that you need to be aware of the people that you are leading and look for the next leader. So you need to be aware of what skill sets and gifts that they have, so you can plug them into the opportunities that become available. So I think that also just to be that open, available leader is very important, so that you can be able to be approachable, so that the social dynamic works much better. But I think that there are several different social responsibilities as a leader, and those are a few that I think that they would have to have. Back to you, Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Trisha. That was great. And Andrea, I'm going to ask you to dig deep into your well of, tools and knowledge. And just, I'd like to ask you, what do you feel today are some of the biggest challenges that leaders face within today's climate? Political or social or whatever, but within this day and age, what are the biggest challenges that you see leaders are facing?
Thank you. I believe that the greatest things that leaders are facing today in today's society are the division in how people think, and then the anger over the division. That doesn't it crosses all barriers. It doesn't matter where you're at, what you're doing. Right now, we are in huge tension in our society, and it's something that we're going to have to address. We aren't listening to each other. We aren't hearing that we do actually have many of the same goals. We're just coming at it from different perspectives. I think it's a huge issue for leaders to try to take the high road instead of getting in the middle of the fray and being the people that are causing the problems. We personally have a lot of issues with that. We have people who are well, let's just say pro-Trump and pro-Obama that we work with every day. And we have to rise above both sides to remind people that we do all have things in common, and we need to look at those things, not just get focused on the people that we like or the ideal that we like or the supposed idea that we are going for, because really both people have some value and have some ideas that are going to help the country one way or the other. And I may not agree with either one of them in many things, but I do know that there is a purpose for leadership, and that we need to honor that, and that we also need to find a way to come together. Back to you.
Awesome. I would like to do another round if you guys are up for it, because we have time. So I'll just go through the same order that we went before. So Tammy, if you would be interested. I'm so interested that you have done so advanced work also. And this. So, let me look at this. We're going to talk about, or I'm going to ask you about leadership ethics. And are you aware of any current controversies in the area of leadership ethics? And if you could discuss some of these, that would be great. Or just your understanding of leadership ethics. I'd love to hear more about that from you, Tammy.
All right. Thank you for that question. So a little bit more about myself. I think you know that I teach. I'm a college instructor and I adjunct other places. So my doctorate is educational leadership, but I teach business classes. So just this past week on Monday, I teach a dual credit with high school students. So they're taking college credit in high school. And it was on ethics. And I was asking, how do you define some of these words? Your question earlier about social responsibility. They didn't have an answer for it. And when I talked about these business leaders that make bad decisions, they weren't quite grasping what I was talking about, that we have several examples of some really bad leaders that made some really bad decisions. Enron kind of was way before their time, but it's one of those main cases we always look at of people making really bad decisions. And those that follow these leaders continue to make the same bad decisions. So there's plenty of examples out there of bad leaders making bad business decisions that can cost a company a lot of money. I've used the example of, we've had an incident where a gal worked at a tanning salon and embezzled $5,000. Like, how did this tanning salon not miss $5,000? So there's always examples of people making bad decisions. And when it trickles up and it's a leader and they don't understand right from wrong, I think there's a huge problem with that. And I tell my students, part of what I'm trying to tell you is when you're trying to make decisions, when you become a leader, is that you understand it may not be illegal, but that doesn't mean it's right. So I think it's a huge problem. And there's cheating also in high school and college, which is a whole nother ethical issue. But I think it's a really big problem that we don't always want to address or approach. Thank you for the question.
And thank you for more details about what you do. I love that. Okay, so next is Trisha. You came second, right? Or the next one in line? All right, yeah. Awesome. So this question, I'm just going through these. I changed a lot of them last night, but this is more of some general questions about yourself and how you connect to what's going on in the society, like what's going on in the world personally. So this question I'd like to ask you is, in what manner and to what degree do you actually stay in touch with current events, and how do those current events help you as a leader?
Thank you. Well, I am not very good with keeping up with current events. I don't watch the news. I feel it's too depressing, and they tend to have a bone and chew on it for a very, very long time. So if it was more pertinent, I will find my information through my husband, who watches the news constantly. And And if there's something important, he makes me aware of it. And then I can go on, look for specific information to look up details that are not necessarily spun in a certain direction. I do feel that being aware of social issues is important for leaders, especially for like our presidents and senators and anyone in a position of authority, because if they're aware of the social issues, then they're going to be able to deal with the people better because they can understand where they might be coming from because they're dealing with these certain situations, such as flooding, poverty, what have you, whatever situation they're having, they'll be able to understand it better because they're aware of the situation. So I myself am not very good at this, but I think leaders that have positions of power or have been nominated to these positions should be more aware of social issues. Back to you.
Thank you, Tricia. I also like to learn, well, I like to learn about history through my husband. So I like just to hear his kind of take on it. And if I have a question like, what happened during World War II? What was that all about? I mean, he just kind of gives me that overview and so I don't have to read all the books. So, and I like his point of view. So next is Andrea. I have a question for you that I hope will be relatively easy. What qualities do you look for in a leader? And can you provide an example of a leader who embodies these ideals? And how do they do that?
Thank
Andrea.
you. I love that question. One of the things that I've had, I am a churchgoer. I have been in the church all my life. I am one of those kind of people. And that's a place where you really have to look for somebody who you can trust. And I think trust is a huge, huge issue. I grew up in a church and actually had my first pastor left when I was very young, so I don't remember him. But the second pastor that I had was just a really great guy, very honest, trustworthy, all of those great things. But he left because people didn't like his honesty. And so there was something about that that really hurt. And we got a new guy that came in, and he wasn't very honest. He wasn't very trustworthy, and he was really quite cruel to me. So I look for people who are also nice and have respect for people, and that they care about people that they are working with. I do have somebody that does embody that. There's actually two of them. One happens to be my husband, who is also a pastor, but also the senior pastor that I worked with and was his personal assistant for 10 years. He exuded all of that. He was a peacemaker. He was a person who cared about the people. He cared about the people so much that he would actually sacrifice his own health sometimes because he cared about the people so much. And he was very honest and kind and trustworthy. And when he made a mistake, he owned up to it. And he was just, that's the kind of person I would like to emulate. Somebody who's trustworthy and kind and owns up to their issues and sacrifices for others so that they might succeed. And I'm going to stop here, but I want to say that I'd like to hear from you the answer to one of your questions.
Which question would you like to hear the answer to? Or you want me to pick a different one?
You get to pick. You pick.
Okay, I get to pick. Wow. So I'm going to answer the same question that you just answered. What qualities do I look for in a leader? One of the things that I look for in a leader is that they are in integrity. This is a high value for me. And when I say that they're in integrity is they don't say something that they're not willing to do. They don't ask me to do things that they're not willing to do. And that is, to me, that's the highest form of integrity, is being able to say, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I myself am not willing to do, which makes like the whole parenting thing kind of like really messy. And that's one of the places where I get to see leadership, on a daily basis. I think we all do if we have children, or even we are children. So there, at some point in our lives, we've been children. And whether or not we were raised by parents, there was still an authority figure. And whether that person can act in integrity, meaning I'm not going to ask you, or what would be out of integrity would be do things my way, do as I say, don't do as I do. That to me is hugely offensive in my body. It makes me sick. I actually feel physically sick when I'm around people like that. So who is a role model for that kind of integrity? I have lived my life, and I'll say that there have been a lot of ministers that I say thank you for them being in my life, and who have been role models for that kind of integrity. They're not asking us to follow Christ without them being Christ followers in a way that felt integritous, if that's even a word. But that to me is one of those qualities that I find very helpful. And my husband does a pretty good job. I will have to admit, though, that because I'm beside him and I keep him in line, which I'm imagining, Andrea, was a part of your gift to these people in your life as well, that it's very helpful for us to be there and just to kind of, help them stay on that straight and narrow, being in integrity with what they're asking. So thank you for asking me to share my perspective. And at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Tricia, our Toastmaster for today. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you. I always love when we have table topics and we get to actually learn things about each other. I think that's very special. Well, it's time for that part of our meeting where we're going to go to the evaluation portion, and the person that will be handling this portion is Andrea. Andrea, would you please start
Thank you.
our evaluations?
I just feel like I'm talking a lot today. So general evaluation is where we evaluate the meeting and the speeches that have been given. And right now I'm going to hand this over to my evaluator, and I believe that's Dawn Sarah. Is that correct? Correct.
Yes, I am the evaluator for Andrea's speech. And I will have to send in the written evaluation afterwards. I wanted to just go over the objectives really quickly. Prepare a serious speech that opens and closes with humorous stories. Prepare a closing story that reemphasizes the speech's main point, and deliver those stories smoothly and effectively. And I think you're a great storyteller, Andrea. I love your enthusiasm for stories too, and your enthusiasm for telling a tale, and your enthusiasm for making it worth the laugh. I think you find humor in the places that I also find humor, and I figure if it's kindergarten humor, it kind of it relates to everyone. I don't know that your title was "Your Poop is My Bread and Butter," but that's what I kind of took away from that. Like, your poop is my bread and butter. And that original story that you gave us really helped explain why that was a part of this story and your history, and it gave us the story about your father. Then you moved into your mother, and I loved the story of their both being connected to porcelain. And you couldn't have written this a better, funnier story script. Like, who does this? Who has two parents? One of them who is fine porcelain for, trinkets and plates, and one is for the poop, right? The porcelain. You did a great job, and I'm trying to do this, not you did a great job. Andrea did a great job of integrating stories within stories and giving us some pieces of history that make it even more interesting, or that we can connect in our own lives. I don't even know if you're aware that you did that, but I felt so super connected when you mentioned Queen Elizabeth I being the original John receiver. And so a part of my love of history is Queen Elizabeth I. And so that kind of connected me with the story. And those little bunny things, I've never heard of those before. However, I am sure that they're everywhere in my family's homes, because I have a feeling that I've seen bunnies like that before, lots of places. I loved also how this story was personal, and it was your story, and that you're sharing it with us, and you just take one little tiny piece of your life and you can make it magical. And I appreciate that. And your humor, of course, just knocks it out of the ballpark. And I, again, appreciate your point of view and your perspective of life being worth sharing. And so with that, I'd like to say back to you, General Evaluator. Thank you, Andrea.
I'm going to jump in for just a second. The actual, you'll see on the screen that my title was actually Two Porcelains.
Got it. I missed that. It didn't pop up on the speech title on the evaluation, so I missed that. Two porcelains.
It's back to me, and I get to evaluate the whole meeting. Yay! We did a great job, considering that up until just a moment ago, when Angela popped in, hi Angela, we're glad you're with us. With the four of us, we pulled off a meeting. Woo! We're so excited. And even for me, thanks to the speaker who jumped in with an impromptu speech, and the evaluator who jumped in as an impromptu evaluator. Timer, Tammy, you did a great job. Thank you for that. And Trisha, thank you for all that you did as the Toastmaster for today. Your topics, Dawn, were great in the table topics, very insightful, and we learned a lot about each other, and I'm really glad about that. So right now I want to ask Trisha to give us the Counter Grammarian report.
Yes, thank you. Well, we are all advanced speakers, so it's very hard to find instances, but I did find a few. Andrea, when you were doing your impromptu speech, you had a few false starts or double clutches. Some people call them. You would start a sentence and then pause and then start again. I caught a few I think just two, and one ah. Tammy, I caught an ah, two so's, and a couple ands that weren't necessary. And Dawn, you had a few so's today. I didn't count myself, so if anybody has a supplemental report that they would like to tell me how many so's and ands I had, I'd be willing to accept. And I didn't catch anyone saying the word of the day. And I didn't fail to use it myself when I had the opportunity. That is my report.
Thank you, Trisha. And Tammy, can you give us a timer's report?
Yes, I can. Andrea asked for 5 to 7 minutes. She was 7:14. And Andrea, you can kind of confirm my table topics. I spoke for 1:15 and 1:49 for table topics. Trisha was 1:32 and 1:38. Andrea, you were 1:48 and 1:50. And Dawn, your table topic was 2:15. And the evaluation, Dawn, your evaluation was 2 minutes and 54 seconds. There's my timer report.
Thank you, everybody. Right now, I'm going to hand it back to, I guess I'll give it back to Trisha as our Toastmaster for today to wrap up whatever else we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I thought we had an excellent meeting today with the core four of us. And yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I really enjoyed today's meeting. I'll hand it back over to Dawn.
And I'm going to open our meeting up and ask everybody maybe to unmute yourself. And I forgot to give to ask for feedback from everybody about Andrea's speech. So if you would like to give some feedback, just pop in and raise your hand. I think Trisha, go ahead.
I know Andrea provided it off the cuff, impromptu speech, and I did notice that from time to time she was looking up. And I just thought I would mention it because, especially when it's flowing, you don't really know exactly maybe where you're going. You know the story, but so you just watch, make sure you keep that eye contact with us. But really, that's the only thing I noticed. I thought you obviously are a great storyteller, and I knew that happened and knew the name of the gentleman that created the toilet. So when you hit it, I was like, yes.
Thank you.
I have just a few comments. I appreciate people that are willing to do an impromptu speech. I was kind of working on one this morning, but then I realized it maybe would only be 3 minutes long. So thank you for jumping in. I enjoyed your props. I'm glad you went and found those. I'm not real familiar with plates and all that. I recognize the bunny, so that was interesting. But I love the storytelling about you and your family. When we get older, it's always nice to reflect on what impacted us from our younger years and how important our family is. So that is what I enjoyed about your speech.
Thanks.
And the impromptu nature of it as well.
Thank you, everybody.
And I have one more thing I have to say. It's like the other thing I connected to is I have a friend who collects those plates from all the different presidencies, and I had the opportunity to have dinner on the presidential plates, which was like a big deal, right? Like a really big deal. So I probably saw the plate that you were talking about, not knowing that that's what it was. So that was another connection. And that's a big deal. I mean, it's kind of a big deal that you were there watching them paint that. That's kind of a really cool thing. Thanks for sharing that story with me and with us.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to open up the agenda for next week and say, thanks, you guys rock because you showed up. You're doing it. Andrea, again, I think you could do an impromptu speech every time and I'd be deliciously happy. so yeah. All right.
You're going to stop recording.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Where's my stop recording button? There it is.